Chapter 1. The Glamour of the Silver Screen. The sun hung high above Paramount Studios, its relentless rays bathing the sprawling lot in a golden haze, as Hercule Poirot and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, stepped through the wrought iron gates. We had journeyed across the Atlantic at the behest of Reginald Montgomery, a film director whose name adorned marquees from Piccadilly to Sunset Boulevard. His recent successes, The Crimson Veil, A Gothic Triumph, and Whispers of the Thames, a brooding masterpiece, had cemented his reputation as a titan of the silver screen. Now, he had summoned Poirot's unparalleled deductive mind to consult on his latest project, a detective film poised to redefine the genre. Thus we found ourselves on stage 7, enveloped by the electric hum of Hollywood in its golden age. The set unfurled before us like a conjurer's trick, a Victorian parlor reborn in exquisite detail. Dark mahogany panels lined the walls, their surfaces etched with intricate carvings that caught the light of faux gas lamps. Heavy velvet drapes in deep burgundy-framed windows that opened to nothing but painted backdrops, while a grand fireplace roared with artificial flames, casting flickering shadows across the room. The air buzzed with the mingled scents of sawdust, grease paint, and turpentine, a testament to the alchemy of filmmaking. Poirot paused, his sharp eyes sweeping the scene with meticulous care. "Hastings," he said, his voice low and measured. "Observe how they weave illusion into truth. The precision, the artistry. It is a puzzle in itself, non?" I could only nod, awestruck. "Absolutely, Poirot. It's as though they've plucked a corner of England and planted it here under the California sun." Our host approached, cutting a striking figure amid the chaos. Reginald Montgomery's silver hair gleamed beneath the studio lights, and his tailored suit spoke of a man accustomed to command. His smile was warm, yet carried the weight of confidence earned through years of acclaim. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome to the beating heart of our little dream factory. We're shooting a key scene today, and your expertise will surely elevate it." He waved a hand toward the set, where Miss Evelyn St. Clair held court. Her dark hair fell in sculpted waves, framing a face both regal and enigmatic. She delivered her lines with a voice like liquid silk, each syllable dripping with emotion as the camera drank in her performance. A hush fell over the crew, broken only by the whir of the film reel. Poirot tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "A talent most formidable, Monsieur Montgomery. She commands the stage as though born to it." Montgomery's eyes softened. "She's our crown jewel," he agreed, though his gaze lingered a moment too long. We wove through the labyrinthine set, past actors clad in period finery, gentlemen in starched collars and ladies in rustling gowns, rehearsing their lines with quiet intensity. The crew moved in tandem, a whirlwind of activity. Grips hoisted lights into position, a makeup artist dabbed powder on a perspiring forehead, and a prop master adjusted a candelabra with surgical precision. In a shadowed nook, Miss Penelope Fairmont rehearsed a tender scene, her soft voice quivering with raw vulnerability. She was a picture of delicate beauty, fair-haired, with eyes that shimmered like pools of light. Yet there was a fragility to her, as if she might shatter under scrutiny. Nearby stood her mother, Mrs. Agatha Fairmont, a formidable figure with a pinched expression and a tone that brooked no dissent. "Penelope must have silence," she snapped at a passing assistant, her hands clasped tightly before her. Poirot's moustache gave a subtle twitch. "A protector, Hastings, though perhaps too zealous. The mother's vigilance borders on obsession." I murmured assent, noting the taut lines of Mrs. Fairmont's face. "She's shielding Penelope from something. Hollywood's glare, perhaps?" At that moment, a ripple of excitement passed through the crew as Julian Drake strode onto the set. He was every inch the leading man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that could melt the iciest heart and eyes that sparkled with mischief. His presence seemed to draw the light, and even the most jaded crew members straightened as he passed. Julian exchanged a few easy words with Evelyn, eliciting a peal of laughter, and then flashed a grin at Montgomery. Montgomery's smile tightened ever so slightly. "Julian Drake, our star," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "He has a knack for stealing scenes, on and off camera." Julian's charm was effortless, his confidence unshakable, and yet I sensed a current of tension between him and Montgomery. The director's jaw set as Julian ad-libbed a line during rehearsal, earning appreciative murmurs from the crew. It was clear that Julian's talent and popularity both inspired and unsettled Montgomery, a rivalry simmering just beneath the surface, fueled by the director's pride and the actor's natural magnetism. As we continued our tour, Montgomery paused and gestured toward a lean, sallow man adjusting a set piece near the edge of the stage. "That's Jenkins, my right-hand man," he said. "He keeps both the mansion and the studio running, though I'm afraid Hollywood's glamour isn't quite to his taste." Jenkins offered a curt nod. He wore plain work clothes, his hands rough and stained, and he seemed deeply uncomfortable amid the glamour and bustle. His eyes flicked toward Montgomery, a glance tinged with resentment, before he slipped back into the shadows, unnoticed by most. I leaned closer to Poirot. "That Jenkins fellow, he's an odd duck. Doesn't quite fit this glittering crowd." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "He is an outsider here, Hastings. The world of stars and spectacle is not his, and perhaps he resents those who move so easily within it. The quiet ones often harbor the deepest currents." The afternoon wore on, the set alive with the rhythm of creation. Montgomery orchestrated it all with a conductor's grace, though hints of strain surfaced. A curt exchange with the cinematographer over a lighting angle, a script girl's stifled groan as pages were rewritten on the fly. Yet the director pressed forward, his vision unwavering, even as Julian's improvisations drew admiring glances from the cast and crew. As dusk crept over the lot, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, the crew packed away their tools, their chatter fading into the evening breeze. Montgomery turned to us, his expression genial. "Gentlemen, I won't hear of you staying anywhere but my home. It's a short drive into the hills, and I'd be delighted to have you as my guests." Poirot inclined his head with a gracious nod. "A kind offer, monsieur. We shall accept with gratitude." The journey to Montgomery's estate wound through the Hollywood Hills, the road flanked by eucalyptus trees that rustled in the twilight. At last, the mansion emerged, a majestic sprawl of pale stone and towering windows, its silhouette softened by sprawling gardens. Fountains burbled in the courtyard, their spray glinting like diamonds, while peacocks paraded across the grass, their calls echoing faintly. Stepping inside, we were greeted by opulence. Polished marble floors stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling, chandeliers cast prisms of light, and walls bore oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Vases brimmed with fresh roses, their perfume blending with the earthy scent of aged wood. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister gleaming under the touch of countless hands. Montgomery gestured expansively. "My retreat from the madness of the studio. Here we can discuss the film in peace and perhaps uncover inspiration in the quiet." Poirot glanced around the room, his expression thoughtful. "This house has character, Monsieur Montgomery. I imagine it has witnessed many stories over the years." Montgomery chuckled, his tone light but appreciative. "Indeed it has, Monsieur Poirot, and I hope it will inspire many more. I have planned an intimate dinner with some of my brightest stars in your honor, of course. We shall meet in the dining room at 8 o'clock sharp." We were ushered to our rooms, sumptuous suites with views of moonlit lawns, the air heavy with jasmine. Poirot paused by his window, gazing out as the night settled over the estate. "There is an interesting dynamic among our hosts, Hastings. I sense a certain undercurrent." I smiled, loosening my tie. "They're artists, Poirot. Passionate and perhaps a bit dramatic. It's to be expected." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, perhaps, but I shall observe with interest." Exhaustion soon overtook me. The day's events swirling in my mind, the glamour of the film set, the intriguing personalities, and Poirot's quiet observations. Little did I know that our stay at Montgomery's mansion would soon take an unexpected turn. Chapter 2. A Dinner to Remember. The twilight had deepened by the time Poirot and I made our way down to the dining hall of Reginald Montgomery's estate. The Hollywood hills were now mere shadows beyond the tall windows, and the air carried a faint scent of jasmine from the gardens, blending with the warm, inviting notes of polished wood and candle wax. After the whirlwind of the film studio, I was rather looking forward to a quiet evening. Though, knowing Poirot, I suspected he saw more in this gathering than a simple meal. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured as he adjusted his bow tie with that meticulous precision of his. "Observe well. A dinner is a canvas. Each stroke reveals more than it seems." I couldn't help but grin, brushing a hand over my jacket to smooth it. "You'll find intrigue in a bowl of soup, Poirot. It's just film folk and good food." His eyes twinkled faintly, but he said nothing more as we entered the dining room. And what a room it was! A long mahogany table stretched beneath a chandelier that glittered like a cascade of diamonds, casting a soft golden glow over the silverware and delicate porcelain. Candles flickered along the table, their light dancing across the faces of the guests already seated. The walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings. Stern ancestors, no doubt, keeping a watchful eye on the proceedings. A grand fireplace crackled softly, adding a cozy warmth to the scene. Reginald Montgomery sat at the head of the table, looking every bit the Hollywood mogul in his tailored dinner jacket, his silver hair catching the light. He raised a glass of wine and smiled broadly. "To our guests, Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, and to the art we craft together." We all echoed the toast, and I settled into my chair beside Poirot, taking in the company. To Montgomery's right was Evelyn St. Clair, the actress I'd seen on set earlier. She was even more striking up close, with her dark hair swept into an elegant style and a sapphire gown that shimmered with every movement. Her smile was captivating, though there was a sharpness to her gaze that made me think she was not one to be trifled with. "To art," she said with a playful lilt. "Though, Reggie, your art does keep us on a tight leash." Montgomery laughed, but I noticed his eyes narrow just a fraction. "Discipline, Evelyn, is the soul of genius. You thrive under it." "Or chafe, perhaps," she replied, her lips curving into a sly smile. "Some of us prefer a little freedom." At that, Julian Drake, seated across from Evelyn, leaned in with a roguish grin. "Freedom is the secret to inspiration, isn't it, Evelyn? I find the best performances come when the heart leads, not the script." Montgomery's jaw tightened. "And yet, Julian, the script is what brings order to chaos. Not all of us can improvise our way through life." Julian's eyes sparkled. "Perhaps not, but some of us make it look rather good." Evelyn laughed, her gaze flicking between the two men. "Gentlemen, must I remind you the camera loves a little chaos? It keeps things interesting." Montgomery's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "The camera, my dear, loves what I tell it to love." Penelope Fairmont, seated beside her mother, tried to join in. "I think the camera loves sincerity most of all," she said softly, glancing shyly at Montgomery. Montgomery's expression softened. "You've a rare gift, Penelope. The screen will adore you." Mrs. Agatha Fairmont stiffened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "A gift that merits more than a minor part, surely," she said, her voice clipped. "The story dictates the roles, madam. Her time will come," Montgomery replied, his tone cooling. Penelope's cheeks flushed. "I'm just happy to be here, Mr. Montgomery. Truly." Her mother's gaze hardened. "Gratitude is all well and good, but ambition is better." Julian, ever the charmer, turned his attention to Evelyn. "Tell me, Evelyn, do you find ambition attractive? Or is it charm that wins the day?" Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "A dangerous question, Julian. I suppose it depends on the man." Montgomery interjected. "Ambition builds empires. Charm merely entertains the court." Julian raised his glass in a mock salute. "Then may we all be emperors tonight." Victor Langley, a lean figure with a sardonic smirk, introduced earlier by Montgomery as the screenwriter, watched the exchange with a wry smile. "To emperors and their courts, may the best man win." Poirot leaned toward me, voice low. "Observe, Hastings, the rivalry. It is not only for the camera. There are many performances tonight." I nodded, noting the glances exchanged around the table. Penelope's eyes lingered on Montgomery, her admiration clear, while her mother's disapproval was palpable. Evelyn seemed to bask in the attention, her laughter ringing out as she deftly navigated the verbal sparring between Julian and Montgomery. As the main course was cleared, the conversation shifted toward the film's script. Victor Langley, lounging at the far end, swirled his wine and fixed Montgomery with a sardonic smile. "Tell me, Reginald, how many more times will you rewrite the ending before you finally let the writer have his say?" Montgomery's eyes narrowed. "A director's job is to shape the story, Victor. I trust you'll remember that the next time you deliver pages at the 11th hour." Victor's tone sharpened. "Perhaps if you didn't change your mind every day, I wouldn't have to. But then, perhaps you enjoy chaos, so long as you can play the hero who saves the day." A tense silence fell. Evelyn glanced between them, lips parted as if to intervene, but Julian beat her to it, grinning. "I'd pay to watch you two duel with typewriters." Montgomery forced a laugh. "I prefer a sharper weapon." Victor leaned forward, his voice low. "Careful, Reginald. Sometimes the pen is sharper than the sword, or the director's tongue." Montgomery's face darkened, but he said nothing, and the conversation awkwardly shifted back to lighter topics. Yet the undercurrent of animosity lingered, and I noticed that Victor's gaze lingered on Montgomery for a moment too long, his jaw clenched as if holding back a final damning word. Just then, the door swung open, and Jenkins, the handyman from the set, stepped in. He looked terribly out of place in his work clothes, carrying a small toolbox. "Beg pardon, sir," he said to Montgomery, his voice gruff. "The window in the study's jammed. Thought I'd see to it before it worsens." Montgomery waved him off curtly. "Very well, but make it quick." Jenkins nodded and slipped away, though not before his eyes flicked briefly toward Evelyn. I wondered if there was some history there, but it seemed trivial, probably just a passing glance. "Curious timing," I whispered to Poirot. "Oui, Hastings," he replied, his gaze still on the door. "A man of tools among the glitter of stars. He sees more than he speaks, I think." I shrugged. Poirot always did have a way of making the mundane seem mysterious. The meal progressed, and with it, the conversation flowed, a mix of Hollywood gossip, witty repartee, and the occasional sharp remark. Evelyn teased Montgomery about the script, her tone light, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. "If you change my lines one more time, Reggie, I'll start improvising in French," she said with a laugh. Montgomery chuckled, though his eyes betrayed a hint of irritation. The script evolves, Evelyn. It's the nature of the beast. Penelope, bless her, tried to chime in with a compliment about the food, but her voice was so soft it was nearly lost in the chatter. Mrs. Fairmont, on the other hand, made no effort to hide her disdain. "Such extravagance for a simple dinner," she muttered, though loud enough for all to hear. Langley, meanwhile, seemed content to watch, his cryptic comments, like "every scene has its shadows," drawing puzzled looks from me and sharp glances from Montgomery. I couldn't tell if he was being profound or just trying to stir the pot. As the main course gave way to dessert, a decadent chocolate torte that melted on the tongue, the atmosphere seemed to shift. Jenkins reappeared briefly, lingering by the door with his toolbox, his eyes darting around the room before he vanished again. Evelyn's laughter, which had been so bright earlier, now sounded a touch forced, and Mrs. Fairmont's posture grew even stiffer, if that were possible. Langley's gaze sharpened, as if he were waiting for something to happen. Poirot whispered faintly, his expression unreadable. "The air, it is charged, Hastings. Beneath the glamour lies a tangle of threads." I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but before I could ask, Montgomery rose, his glass aloft. "A splendid evening, friends. Rest well. Tomorrow we return to the set." The guests began to disperse. Evelyn with a graceful nod, Julian lingering to exchange a few last words with her, Penelope casting a wistful glance at Montgomery, and Langley with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jenkins, I noticed, was nowhere to be seen. As we made our way to the hall, I stifled a yawn. "Well, Poirot, what's your verdict on the evening?" He paused, his eyes distant as he glanced back toward the dining room. "The players have taken their positions, Hastings. Ambition, envy, secrets, they stir beneath the surface. The stage is set." I chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "You'll turn a dinner into a drama yet, old chap." "Perhaps," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "But the curtain has not yet fallen." We climbed the grand staircase to our rooms, the mansion's silence settling around us like a heavy blanket. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity at Poirot's words, but exhaustion won out. Whatever mysteries he saw in the evening's events, they could wait until morning. For now, I was content to let the night's glamour linger in my dreams, unaware of the shadows that waited just beyond the dawn. Chapter 3. The Body in the Study. The first rays of morning crept over the Hollywood hills, gilding the windows of Montgomery's mansion and stirring the household from its uneasy sleep. I had spent a restless night in my guest suite, the echoes of the previous evening's tensions replaying in my mind. The house was quiet, eerily so, after the laughter and sharp words that had filled it just hours before. I was just finishing my shave when a shrill scream shattered the calm. The sound came from below, urgent and unmistakable. I rushed into the corridor, colliding with Poirot, who emerged from his own room, already immaculate and alert. "That was from the study, mon ami," he said, his eyes narrowed with concern. We hurried down the grand staircase, the echo of our footsteps joined by the frantic patter of the housemaid, Mrs. Lane. She stood in the open doorway of the study, her face ashen, hands trembling violently. "Sir, oh, sir, it's Mr. Montgomery," she sobbed, clutching the doorframe for support. Poirot stepped forward, his manner gentle but commanding. "Courage, madame. Please let us see." We entered the study, a room of masculine elegance, lined with dark wood and adorned with film posters and heavy velvet curtains. The morning sun filtered through the windows, illuminating the scene of horror at the great mahogany desk. Reginald Montgomery sat slumped over, his silver hair stark against the blood staining his starched shirt. An ornate dagger was buried deep in his chest, its jeweled hilt catching the light. A half-smoked cigar rested in the ashtray, its smoke long since faded, and a faint, unfamiliar scent, something sweet and exotic, lingered in the air. I drew a sharp breath. Good heavens, Poirot! He's been murdered. Poirot's gaze swept the room, missing nothing. You see, Hastings? The final act has been played. Mrs. Lane's sobs grew louder. I only came in to tidy, sir, as I do every morning upon my arrival, and I found him just like that. Poirot offered her his handkerchief. You are most brave, madame. Please compose yourself in the kitchen. Hastings, see that she is comfortable. Then return at once. I led the shaken maid away, then hurried back to find Poirot already examining the scene. He moved with careful precision, noting the neatly arranged mail and documents, Montgomery's glasses in their rightful place, the pen laying on a stack of scripts, as if the director would come back at any minute to finish his work. The window behind the desk was slightly ajar, letting in a cool breeze. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. No sign of a struggle. The blow was swift, deliberate. The window opened, but no footprints below. Our murderer is clever, Hastings. Within the hour, the police descended upon the mansion, uniformed officers cordoning off the study, photographers capturing the grim tableau, and a dour-faced coroner kneeling beside the body. The coroner, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his hawkish nose, examined Montgomery's stiffened limbs and the pooling of blood beneath his skin. Rigor mortis is well advanced, he announced, checking his pocket watch. Death occurred between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning. The liver mortis pattern suggests he never left this chair after the fatal strike. Poirot nodded, absorbing the details. Merci, Doctor. The lead detective, Inspector Harold Morrison, arrived shortly after. A broad-shouldered man with a clipped moustache, and a demeanor that mixed skepticism with grudging respect for Poirot's reputation. Monsieur Poirot, Morrison said, tipping his hat, I've read your case files. Suppose you'll want to meddle in my investigation. Poirot's eyes twinkled. None, Inspector. I merely observe. But I suggest you recall all who attended last night's dinner. The killer is among them. The police telephoned and dispatched cars, and by early afternoon the drawing-room was once again the stage for a most unusual gathering. The first to arrive was Evelyn Street. Claire, sweeping through the doors in a tailored suit and dark glasses, her usual poise now tinged with genuine distress. She removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes, and cast a wary glance at the assembled officers before focusing on Poirot. Is it true, Monsieur Poirot? Is Reginald— Her voice faltered. Poirot offered a gentle nod. I am afraid so, mademoiselle. Please, have a seat. Julian Drake followed soon after, striding in with the energy of a man accustomed to command attention. He looked around, jaw set, and muttered, Hollywood's lost its king. He took a seat near Evelyn, but his gaze was restless, flicking from Poirot to the uniformed officers and back. Shortly behind him came Penelope Fairmont and her mother. Penelope's face was pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief, while Mrs. Agatha Fairmont's lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line. I hope this will not take long, Mrs. Fairmont said sharply, as if the force of her will alone could banish unpleasantness. Penelope, however, looked desperately at Poirot. I can't believe it. He was so kind to me, she whispered. Victor Langley, the screenwriter, entered with a languid air, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. He offered a sardonic smile. So the curtain falls. I suppose we're all suspects now, Inspector. Inspector Morrison, who stood by the fireplace, gave a curt nod. You are, Mr. Langley. Please take a seat and wait for further instructions. Last to arrive was Jenkins. He entered quietly, almost apologetically, removing his cap as he stepped into the room. He wore his best jacket, though it still bore the faint scent of oil and sawdust. Jenkins hesitated near the door, but Poirot beckoned him in with a reassuring gesture. "Jenkins, you were a part of the household last night and present around dinner time. Please join us." Poirot's tone was warm, and Jenkins nodded, taking a seat at the end of the row, his posture stiff but attentive. For a moment, the group sat in uneasy silence, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Poirot stood at the center, his presence commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, I regret the necessity of this summons. The police have determined that Reginald Montgomery was murdered between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning. As you were all present at dinner, it is essential that you remain until the truth is uncovered. Each of you will be interviewed in turn." Inspector Morrison stepped forward, his notebook ready. "You'll all be asked to account for your whereabouts and activities after dinner last night. And let me be clear, no one leaves until I say so." A ripple of protest passed through the group. Mrs. Fairmont huffed, Julian bristled, and Victor rolled his eyes, but none dared defy the inspector's authority. Poirot's gaze swept the room, pausing on each face. "Remember, the truth has a way of revealing itself, even when we least expect it. For now, I ask only for your patience and your candor." Jenkins, seated quietly among the luminaries, seemed almost invisible, yet his presence felt oddly vital. A humble thread in the intricate tapestry of this Hollywood tragedy. As I watched, my mind raced, marveling at Poirot's calm certainty. Whoever had struck down Montgomery, I knew my friend would unravel the mystery with his inimitable finesse. Chapter 4. The interviews begin. The afternoon sunlight cast long burnished shafts through the leaded glass of Montgomery's study, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air, ghostly reminders of the morning's violence. The room, though now cleared of its tragic occupant, retained the somber gravity of recent events. The red stain on the antique desk remained as a mute testament to the horror that had unfolded. Inspector Morrison consulted his notebook with the brisk efficiency I'd come to expect from American police. "We'll isolate them," he declared, his voice clipped. "Alibis, motives, opportunities. Someone will let slip a detail that points to the culprit." Poirot inclined his head with that peculiar precision of his. "Mais certainement, Inspector. Yet in Hollywood the artifice does not end when the curtain falls. Here, even in the shadow of death, the performance persists. We must be attuned not only to what is spoken, but to the silences between words, the truths concealed beneath the veneer." Morrison's lips curled into a wry smile. "You may have your subtleties, Poirot. I will concern myself with the facts. Let us begin with the staff. In my experience, those who serve often see more than those they serve." Poirot inclined his head, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Very well, Inspector. Let us peel back the layers of this particular drama, one player at a time." I found myself rather impressed by Morrison's practical approach, though I suspected Poirot would find far more in these interviews than mere facts and alibis. Mrs. Lane sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The morning's shocking discovery had left her pale and shaken, yet she answered their questions with the careful precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime working for Hollywood's elite. "I don't live here at the house, sir," she explained to Morrison's questioning, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I go home to my own place in town every night after I finish up with dinner service, come back at 6 sharp every morning to get breakfast started." "And last night?" Poirot asked gently, his head tilted to one side in that curious manner of his. "Same as always, sir. Finished cleaning up the dining room around 11 o'clock, locked up tight like Mr. Montgomery always wanted, and caught the streetcar home." Got back this morning at 6 on the dot. Let myself in through the kitchen. The streetcar home. Got back this morning at 6 on the dot. Let myself in through the kitchen. Went straight to the study to dust before breakfast. Her voice caught, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Well, you know what I found. Morrison's pencil scratched across his notepad. You locked up everything? Every door and window, sir. Front door, back door, those fancy French doors out to the patio. Mr. Montgomery was real particular about keeping things secure. The other help, Mr. Henley, who does the gardens, and Mr. Briggs, the chauffeur. They only got keys to the garage and tool sheds, not the main house. Poirot leaned forward with interest, his small hands clasped before him. A Jenkins, madame? He has the access to the house, yes? Mrs. Lane's composure wavered. Well, sure he does. Jenkins has been with Mr. Montgomery going on 15 years now. They go way back, from before Mr. Montgomery made it big in pictures. He takes care of all the repairs and such, both here and down at the studio. He's the only one of us who actually lives on the property. Got that little guest house out back. Works all hours, that one. And Mr. Montgomery trusted him completely. Was he working late last night? Morrison pressed. Saw him in the study just before I left, fooling with that darn window again. Things always sticking. Mr. Montgomery was still at his desk, going over some papers. Poirot's eyebrows rose with subtle interest, and he tilted his head like an inquisitive bird. What is your impression of this Jenkins, madame? A man of good character, perhaps? Mrs. Lane glanced nervously toward the door, as if worried about being overheard. He's always been, well, devoted to Mr. Montgomery, you understand. But lately, she dropped her voice. There's been talk around here about some changes that got Jenkins all worked up. Quel genre de changement? Poirot asked, then caught himself. Forgive me, what kind of changes? The engagement, sir. Her words were barely a whisper now. I saw Poirot and Morrison exchange glances. This was clearly news to both of them. Mr. Montgomery and Miss St. Clair have been secretly engaged for months, planning to announce it at the premiere. Of course, she was going to move in here after they tied the knot, but Jenkins, well, he can't stand that woman. And between you and me, she's a real piece of work when the cameras ain't rolling. Poor Mr. Drake doesn't even know what hit him. Morrison looked up sharply. How's that? Oh, it's quite the mess, sir. Mr. Drake's been crazy about Miss St. Clair for near 2 years now, ever since they worked together. The picture they shot in Italy, can't recall the name. Word is they were an item, but she kept it hush-hush, probably waiting for something better to come along. And sure enough, along comes Mr. Montgomery, the only man in Hollywood who could make her a real star. That dame only looks out for number one, if you ask me. Poirot studied her with penetrating interest, his grey eyes missing nothing. You seem to have strong feelings about this situation, madame. Mrs. Lane's eyes flashed with indignation. Mr. Montgomery was a gentleman. He didn't deserve to be used like that. Jenkins saw it too, and between you and me, I think it tore him up, watching his old friend fall for someone like her. I found myself rather taken aback by the woman's vehemence. In England, household staff rarely spoke so openly about their employers' private affairs, but Americans seem to have different notions about such things. Poirot, however, appeared to find her candor most illuminating. Très intéressant, he murmured, more to himself than to us. The affairs of the heart, they make for the most dangerous of motives, non? Jenkins was waiting for us in his domain, the tool shed behind the mansion. It was an orderly little space, meticulously arranged like a military quartermaster's depot. Every wrench, hammer, and screwdriver hung in precise formation on pegboards lining the walls, a place where chaos had clearly never been permitted entry. He stood stiffly, a heavy wrench in one hand, though he didn't appear to be working. His discomfort was plain and understandable. A man like Jenkins was far more used to being invisible than interrogated. "I was fixing that damned window in the study," he said, voice gruff and unpolished. "Been sticking for weeks. Drove Mr. Montgomery half mad. Told me during dinner to finally see to it proper." Morrison consulted his notebook. "What time did you finish the work?" "I worked on it during dinner, like he asked. Got it open, but the frame wasn't catching right. Had to come back after dinner to tighten the fittings, around 11:15, maybe 11:30. Mr. Montgomery was still at his desk, working on some script pages. I told him it was done and left through the kitchen. Mrs. Lane was just finishing up." Poirot tilted his head, hands clasped behind his back. "You have been with Monsieur Montgomery a long time, n'est-ce pas?" Jenkins's jaw tightened. 15 years this coming Christmas. We both came from the same place. Same dreams even. Dirt poor nobodies from Oklahoma, trying to make something out of nothing." There was a tremor beneath his words. Something old and raw, like a scar reopened. "We came out here in 1920, Jenkins continued. 2 farm boys with stars in our eyes and holes in our shoes, slept in flop houses, shared cold beans out of the can. We worked whatever jobs we could find, but Reggie, Montgomery, he had the charm, could talk his way into anything. Me? I kept the lights running while he lit up the town." There was no missing the bitterness in his voice now. I exchanged a glance with Poirot. Jenkins wasn't just a servant. He was a man who'd watched someone else live his dream. Morrison leaned forward. "And now you work for him?" Jenkins gave a dry laugh. "Started out as partners, ended up as his handyman. Life's funny that way." Poirot's eyes narrowed just slightly. "And this transformation of your friendship, it has not sat easily with you?" Jenkins set the wrench down carefully on the workbench, his movements slow and deliberate. "You spend 15 years watching someone else live the life you were supposed to have, see how it sits with you. But I did my job, always have." There was a quiet intensity in his words that unsettled me. "After you completed your work the second time," Poirot said, "did you see anyone else on the property?" Jenkins scratched the back of his neck. "Well, I noticed a car still in the drive when I left. Looked like Langby's Pierce Arrow, though I couldn't say for certain. Just caught the chrome flashing in the street lamp as I was heading to the streetcar. Could have been anyone's, I guess." Poirot nodded slowly. "And the other guests? Did you notice anything odd? Any tensions?" Jenkins grimaced. "Drake's not bad, far as actors go. Arrogant, but that's standard. But that St. Clair woman—" He shook his head with something close to disgust. "She's poison. Had Julian wrapped around her finger for 2 years, now she's turned it on Montgomery. She gets bored quick, always sniffing around for the next opportunity. And with Montgomery's money troubles, I reckon she was getting ready to jump ship." Poirot bowed his head slightly. "Merci, Monsieur Jenkins. You have been most helpful." As we stepped out of the shed and back into the dappled California sunlight, I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. "Good Lord, Poirot," I said quietly. 2 friends come out here together, dreaming the same dream, and only one of them makes it. Poirot's eyes were on the house. Only one of them makes it. Poirot's eyes were on the house. "Oui, mon ami. And the other is left behind to fix jammed windows and leaking pipes. But remember, Jenkins had access, motive, and perhaps a heart full of silent grievances." "He did seem genuinely bitter," I said. "Still, he left the house before midnight, and he says Montgomery was alive." Poirot gave me a small, knowing smile. "Yes, he says so. But consider, he claims to have left through the kitchen just as Mrs. Lane was cleaning up." I frowned. Mrs. Lane didn't mention anything. "Exactly," Poirot said softly. Perhaps Monsieur Jenkins is more than just the man who fixed the window. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been closest to us the longest." I shuddered slightly, thinking of the bitterness in Jenkins's voice when he spoke of watching someone else live the life he'd wanted. In my experience, such long festering grievances could indeed lead to desperate acts. Victor Langley was waiting for us in Montgomery's library, a room that reeked of cultivated taste and quiet expense, with floor-to-ceiling shelves, polished wood, and the smell of old books and expensive cigars. Langley, of course, looked perfectly at home in it. He lounged in a wing-back chair like a man with nowhere particular to be, and all the time in the world to enjoy it. A crystal tumbler of brandy glinted in his hand. Rather early for such indulgence, I thought, though perhaps the death of one's producer justified a morning drink. Still, I couldn't shake the impression that it was less about grief than habit. "Yes, I stayed late," he said without waiting for the question, swirling the amber liquid with practiced ease. "Reginald and I had unfinished business, script revisions, money matters, the usual creative disputes that can't wait until morning." Morrison, who I was beginning to suspect had the subtlety of a brick, glanced up from his notepad. "That argument at dinner didn't sound like script revisions." Victor smiled thinly, and I caught a flicker of steel beneath his polished exterior. "In Hollywood, Inspector, everything is personal. Reginald owed me money, a good deal of it, for work I did without credit on his last 3 pictures. I was growing rather tired of being his silent partner." "Tired enough to kill him?" Morrison asked, with his usual delicacy. Victor chuckled and took a sip of his drink. "Dead men don't pay debts, Inspector. I'm not in the business of throwing away investments." Poirot leaned forward slightly, that familiar gleam in his eye. "But you had other leverage, no? Something you believed more profitable than violence?" Victor's expression didn't change, but I saw him shift slightly in his chair. Reginald's engagement to Evelyn St. Clair, he thought no one knew. He was terrified Julian Drake would find out before the press junket. Would have been bad for business. The scorned leading man and the ambitious ingenue, not exactly a recipe for a smooth premiere. "Ah," Poirot murmured. "So you used this knowledge to secure your repayment?" "Information is currency, Monsieur Poirot, especially in this town." His eyes glinted with something not unlike pride. "I told Reginald I'd keep quiet, in exchange for what he owed me and a producer credit on his next film. We were negotiating terms when I left." "And what time was that?" Morrison asked, scratching at his notepad. "Around 12:30, maybe a little closer to 1. We lost track of time." I glanced at Poirot, who gave no visible sign of what he thought, but I'd learned by now that his silence often said more than his words. Morrison kept going. "Did you see anyone else in the house?" "Jenkins, I suppose, skulking about as always, though we didn't cross paths. And when I was leaving, I thought I saw someone in the conservatory." Poirot perked up. "A man? A woman?" Victor paused. The brandy hovered halfway to his lips. "Couldn't say. It was dark. I wasn't paying attention." "A curious detail to notice if you weren't looking," Poirot said lightly. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Old habit. I notice things. Comes with the profession." "And when you left," Poirot continued, "Monsieur Montgomery, he was still alive?" "Very much so. Sloshed, irritable but alive, muttering about how he had to sort things out before morning." Victor's smile returned, dry and hollow. I assumed he meant our little arrangement. As we stepped out into the hallway, I found myself frowning. Langley had the easy charm of a man too used to being right, too comfortable pulling strings in the shadows. "Thinks rather highly of himself, that one," I said, once we were out of earshot. Blackmails the man, drinks his liquor, and calls it a negotiation. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. He is intelligent, calculated. But he let something slip, Hastings. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Poirot adjusted his cuffs. You recall, Hastings, that Reginald Montgomery was not drunk during dinner. Tired, perhaps, distracted, but his mind was clear. Yes, I noticed that too. And yet Langley insists he left him drunk and agitated sometime after midnight, Poirot said quietly. It is possible Montgomery began drinking later alone, but I do not think so. That is not how a desperate man prepares to confront his debts, and Langley also claims they lost track of time during their negotiation. But a man so concerned with debts does not lose track of time, especially not when trying to secure a producer credit. You think he's lying? I think, mon ami, that Monsieur Langley sees himself as a man above consequences. But even men who trade in secrets sometimes forget which ones they've already sold. I couldn't argue with that. And yet, for all his arrogance, I couldn't help but feel Langley was more snake than killer. Still, snakes bite, don't they? Are you captivated by the mysteries of nocturnal tales? Join our exclusive membership community and unlock a world of additional intrigue. For just $2.99 a month, become a supporter and enjoy ad-free versions of all our stories, priority replies to your comments, and access to members-only polls where you help shape our content. Step up to our Extra Stories tier at $9.99 monthly for early access to new episodes, member shoutouts, plus 2 bonus mysteries each month that you won't find anywhere else. And for our most devoted mystery lovers, the Collector's tier at $24.99 includes quarterly ebooks featuring your favorite cases. Plus, our first exclusive members-only episode, The Ashworth Hall Phantom, is now available. A chilling tale crafted especially for our community. Your membership keeps these mysteries alive and brings you deeper into the shadows we explore together. Join now through the link in our description and let the exclusive mysteries begin. Now back to our tale. Evelyn St. Clair was in Montgomery's drawing room, seated with artful poise on a velvet sofa. She wore black, a choice both fitting and, I couldn't help but feel, deliberately selected to enhance her already striking beauty. Her composure under the circumstances was almost too perfect. I went straight home after dinner, she said, her voice low, carefully measured. I have a small place in Beverly Hills. I was alone all evening trying to make sense of everything. Inspector Morrison looked up from his notepad with the brisk air of a man who thought emotion a tiresome obstacle. Notepad with the brisk air of a man who thought emotion a tiresome obstacle. No servants? No visitors? I gave my maid the evening off. I needed time to think about Reginald, about our future together. Her voice caught, delicately, and she dabbed at her eyes with a lace-edged handkerchief. Poirot regarded her with that focused intensity of his grey eyes taking in every tremor, every choice of word, every pause. "You were close to Monsieur Montgomery, mademoiselle?" he asked gently. "We were secretly engaged," Evelyn murmured. "Had been for 3 months. We planned to announce it once the film wrapped." She looked up, eyes brimming with a grief that seemed too exquisitely controlled. "I loved him, truly, despite what people might assume about our professional connection." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Who else knew about the engagement?" "No one. We were very discreet. People already gossip that I'm just another ambitious actress using men to climb the ladder." She flushed prettily. "We didn't want to give them more ammunition." I must admit, I found myself affected by her display. There was something undeniably vulnerable about her, something that made a fellow want to believe her. And yet, from the corner of my eye, I caught Poirot's mustache twitch ever so slightly. never a good sign for the person being questioned. "You said people might misinterpret your professional relationships," Poirot said. "Have there been complications with other gentlemen?" A mask slipped, only briefly. Julian, Mr. Drake, was persistent. We worked together in Italy. He helped me get started. I was grateful, but he mistook that for something deeper. "And how did you respond to his attentions?" Morrison asked, his tone a bit clipped now, perhaps irritated she was keeping her focus on Poirot. "I was kind, but firm. Julian is very charming. But I never encouraged anything beyond professional courtesy." She twisted the handkerchief again, the only sign of tension. "Once Reginald and I began seeing each other, I had to be even more careful. Julian would have been devastated if he'd found out." Poirot leaned in slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You feared his reaction?" "Julian has an intense nature. He convinced himself we shared a grand romance that never existed. If he'd discovered my engagement—" She gave a shudder. "I don't know what he might have done." "Were you planning to tell him eventually?" Morrison asked. "After the announcement, yes. But I was dreading it. Julian can be vindictive. I worried he might try to damage Reginald's career, or worse." "Did Monsieur Montgomery share these fears?" Poirot asked, more quietly now. She hesitated. Just for a moment. Something flickered behind her eyes. A tiny crack in the glass. Poirot saw it. I saw him see it. Lately Reginald had been distracted, distant. I thought perhaps he was worried about Julian, or maybe— She trailed off, her lower lip trembling with what seemed like genuine uncertainty. "Yes, mademoiselle?" Poirot prompted. "Maybe he was having second thoughts. About us. He kept working late, avoided our usual dinners. I even wondered if there might be someone else." Her voice faltered. "Another woman. The thought, it haunted me." "You confronted him?" Morrison asked, his pen poised. "I tried, but he kept brushing it off, saying we'd talk after the film wrapped. But I knew something had changed." Now the tears came in earnest, gliding down her cheeks with practiced elegance. "I was losing him. Just when I thought I'd found something real." We stepped out into the corridor, and I glanced back at the room where she sat, the very picture of tragic glamour. "Poor girl," I murmured. "Seems genuinely broken-hearted. And if Montgomery really was pulling away—" "Ah, mon ami," Poirot said softly, "but it is often in the smallest things that truth slips out." He paused and adjusted a cufflink with unnecessary precision. I waited. When Poirot paused like that, it usually meant something devastating was about to follow. "You recall Hastings?" he said at last. "She claimed she went straight home and was alone all night." "Yes." "And yet," he continued, "she told us she had not seen Reginald in days, that he had been distant, that he was avoiding her." "Right," I said, not seeing the trap yet. "But she also claimed she was trying to make sense of everything that night, about their future, about what he said to her," Poirot said, his voice suddenly colder. "She implied they had spoken that very evening." I blinked. So, if she was home all night after the dinner and he was in his study, then when, mon cher, did they speak? There was a beat of silence. I swallowed. "You think she was lying?" "I think, Hastings, that Mademoiselle St. Clair is a most accomplished actress, both on screen and off. The question is, what role is she playing now?" Julian Drake was waiting in Montgomery's billiards room, pacing like a caged animal among the green baize tables and polished cues. The midday light cut sharp angles through the tall windows, catching on the brass fixtures and the fire in his eyes. His famously handsome features were tight with strain, the usual Hollywood charm stripped away, revealing raw nerves beneath. When Poirot and Morrison entered, Drake turned on us, eyes blazing with frustration and something else. Desperation, perhaps. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he snapped. "You can't seriously think I had anything to do with Reginald's death." Morrison, unbothered, consulted his notebook with his usual brusque calm. "Where were you last night after the dinner?" "At my hotel, the Garden of Allah." He said it as though daring us to question it. "I left after dinner and stayed in my suite the rest of the night." "Can anyone confirm that?" Julian hesitated, ran a hand through his impeccably styled hair. The gesture looked almost rehearsed, and yet there it was, the first crack in the polished facade. "I ordered room service around 11. The waiter should remember. I also made a few calls. To my agent in New York. To a producer in Palm Springs. About a new picture." His voice wavered slightly, and I couldn't tell whether it was guilt or simple nerves that made him falter. Poirot stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "And you did not return here? Not even for a moment?" "No," Julian snapped. "Why would I?" Poirot tilted his head, bird-like. "Perhaps you hope to speak with Monsieur Montgomery privately. You were seen looking displeased during dinner." "Displeased?" Julian gave a bitter laugh. "I just watched the woman I love hang on another man's every word while pretending I didn't exist. Yes, I was distressed." "You speak of Mademoiselle St. Clair," Poirot said gently. Julian resumed his pacing, quicker now, his fists clenching and unclenching, as though he might strike something. "Evelyn and I worked together in Italy 2 years ago. The Eternal City. We were close. More than close. It wasn't just about the film. I thought we had something real." "But she did not share those feelings?" Poirot asked softly. "She said she did." Julian's voice dropped. Julian's voice dropped. "We were lovers. I helped her, gave her introductions, vouched for her talent. She wouldn't be where she is without me. And yet she moved on to Monsieur Montgomery," Poirot murmured. Julian's jaw flexed. Montgomery promised her the lead in his new picture, and God knows what else. I saw it happening, the calculation behind her smile, the weighing of opportunity. She knew he was a mess, but he still had power. "What kind of mess?" Morrison asked. Julian's eyes narrowed. Montgomery was drowning in debt. His last 2 pictures flopped, and he'd started borrowing from private lenders, bad ones, people you don't cross. He was living on borrowed time, and not just figuratively. "And did you tell Miss St. Clair?" He looked away. "I tried to warn Evelyn. She wouldn't listen. Thought it was too good an opportunity. But the man was collapsing under the weight of his own ego and bad deals." Poirot's voice was calm. "Did you ever confront him?" Julian gave a small, unpleasant smile. "I may have hinted that his finances weren't as private as he thought. That word was spreading, that it might reflect badly on his leading lady." Poirot's eyebrows lifted slightly. "That sounds rather like a threat, monsieur." "I was trying to protect her," Julian said. His voice rose, edged with anger. Montgomery was dragging everyone around him down, Evelyn included. Morrison scribbled furiously. "And now he's dead, and Evelyn is no longer tied to him." Julian stopped pacing and stared at Morrison, jaw clenched. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm observing that his death comes at a very convenient moment. For a number of people." Julian let out a short, mirthless laugh. "You don't know Evelyn. She doesn't need a tragedy to move on. She does it all the time. She's probably already calculating her next conquest. Another director, a richer producer, whoever's in a position to open the next door for her to be the perfect husband." He stopped himself. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Ah, so you knew. Julian turned slowly. What? The engagement, Poirot said gently. You've been pretending not to know all day, Monsieur Drake. But your hatred, it's too personal to be about a simple rivalry for affection. Tell me the truth. You knew she was engaged to Montgomery. Julian stared at him, something cracking behind his eyes. Yes, he said at last, voice low. I knew. Found out 3 days ago. She didn't tell me. I overheard it at the studio. Some hairdresser whispering it in the powder room. Evelyn was going to announce it at the premiere. And how did that make you feel? Poirot asked quietly. Julian laughed again, an ugly, brittle sound. Like a damned fool. Like every moment we'd shared meant nothing. I gave her everything I had, and she was planning to marry that old fool. Morrison scribbled something. And yet, Poirot said, you still love her. Julian's mouth twitched. I don't know what I feel anymore. Love, hate. They're two sides of the same coin, aren't they? Poirot studied him carefully. And so you came last night. You watched. You saw them together. You knew she had chosen another. I thought she had, Julian whispered. But the way she looked at me, even then, part of me thought she might still change her mind. Poirot's voice was calm. But then you left. You went home. I did, Julian said fiercely. I didn't kill him. I wanted to. But I didn't. Silence. Morrison closed his notebook. That's all for now, Mr. Drake. I found myself unexpectedly moved by the pain in his voice. Whatever his faults, the man's affection seemed sincere, however poorly returned. As we left the billiards room, I glanced at Poirot. You believe him? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, walking slowly. He is a man betrayed, but also a man with knowledge. Montgomery's debts, Evelyn's ambitions, and he claims to have warned her, protected her. I nodded. Yet she said it was all professional, that she had to fend off his affections. Just so, Poirot murmured. It seems, mon ami, that someone is miscasting their role in this production. Either Mademoiselle Sinclair or Monsieur Drake. And if we listen closely, très attentivement, I believe the truth will soon reveal itself. I pondered this as we walked down the corridor. In my experience, when it came to matters of the heart, the truth was often the first casualty. And in Hollywood, where everything was performance, separating reality from illusion seemed nearly impossible. We found Penelope Fairmont in the conservatory, seated among Montgomery's prized orchids. The glass-paneled room, usually so warm with filtered sunlight and greenery, felt chilled by the tension between mother and daughter. Penelope sat hunched on a wrought-iron bench, clutching a damp handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed from weeping. Her mother, Mrs. Agatha Fairmont, stood beside her like a column of disapproval, stiff-backed, lips pressed into a line so tight it could cut glass. Miss Fairmont, Morrison began, his tone uncharacteristically gentle as he consulted his notepad. We need to ask you about last evening. After dinner. Where did you go? Home, Penelope murmured. Mother and I went straight home to our apartment. Mrs. Fairmont answered more crisply. We retired immediately. Penelope had a long day on set and was quite fatigued. Poirot studied the girl, his gaze soft but piercing. You seemed very fond of Monsieur Montgomery, mademoiselle. He encouraged you, did he not? Penelope's eyes filled again and fresh tears slipped silently down her cheeks. He was wonderful, kind, patient. He said I had real talent, that he wanted to help me become a star. Penelope, her mother said sharply, compose yourself. This isn't the time. But Penelope wasn't listening. He believed in me. When he looked at me, I felt like I mattered. Morrison shot a glance at Poirot. Sounds like your feelings for him were more than professional. I loved him, she said simply, the words tumbling out like something long held back. Mrs. Fairmont inhaled sharply. Penelope? He was older, yes, Penelope continued as if she hadn't heard. But he saw something in me. He stayed late to coach me on my scenes. He listened. He cared. Poirot leaned in slightly, his voice coaxing. And did he return those affections? Penelope nodded slowly. At first, I thought he was just being kind. But then, 3 weeks ago, after filming, he kissed me. The silence was immediate and sharp. Mrs. Fairmont's expression froze. Go on, Poirot said quietly. We started meeting in private. My dressing room, his office. He said we had to be discreet, but people wouldn't understand. Her voice faltered. We became close. You were having an affair? Morrison asked carefully. It wasn't an affair, Penelope said with sudden heat. It was love. And then the explosion came. Mrs. Fairmont's hand moved so quickly it was a blur, a sharp crack of palm against cheek that echoed across the glass ceiling. You little fool, she hissed. You stupid, naive little fool. He was using you just like all the others. Penelope gasped, her hand flying to her cheek, eyes wide with betrayal. No, he loved me, he told me. He was engaged to Evelyn St. Clair, Mrs. Fairmont snapped. Everyone knew it, whether they admitted it or not. You were a dalliance, a distraction. I felt an uncomfortable knot twist in my chest. The rawness of it, the personal devastation, the public unraveling, was difficult to witness. Poirot, however, remained composed. Madame, you were aware of the engagement. Mrs. Fairmont's voice was clipped. I suspected. I saw the way he looked at her. The closed-door meetings, the gossip. I warned Penelope, but she wouldn't listen. You knew? Penelope turned toward her mother, wounded. You knew, and you didn't tell me? I thought you'd come to your senses. But you lied to me. You sneaked off like some stage-door hussy. I was trying to protect you from exactly this. Miss Fairmont, Morrison said, breaking the tension. When was the last time you saw Montgomery alone? Penelope wiped her face with shaking hands. Yesterday, late afternoon before dinner. I went to see him. He seemed distant, cold. I asked him what was wrong, and he said we'd talk after the film wrapped, that things were complicated. And how did that make you feel? Poirot asked gently. Penelope's voice cracked. Like my world was ending. I could tell he was pulling away. I begged him to explain, but he just said he needed to think about what was best for everyone. Mrs. Fairmont crossed her arms. Her fury had cooled into something more calculated. He was preparing to discard her, like I warned. Men like Montgomery don't marry girls like Penelope. They take what they want and leave ruin behind. Penelope's sobs returned in full, her shoulders trembling. It wasn't like that, she whispered. He said I meant something, that we had a future. As we exited the conservatory, I struggled to shake the image of Penelope's devastation and her mother's slap echoing through the greenhouse like a shot fired in anger. Good Lord, I said softly. That girl was completely taken in by Montgomery, and the mother, she was like a blade drawn. Indeed, mon ami, Poirot said thoughtfully. A young woman scorned is one thing, but a mother seeking to restore her daughter's dignity after such public shame? That, I think, is a motive far more dangerous. I shivered. I had seen love turn to hatred before, but not often so swiftly, or so silently. Chapter 5. A Tapestry of Lies. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across Montgomery's mansion, Poirot and Inspector Morrison retreated to the study to compare their notes. The red stain on the mahogany desk seemed to mock us with its stark reminder of the morning's grim discovery, while the faint scent of expensive cologne still lingered in the air, a ghostly presence of secrets yet to be unraveled. Morrison spread his notepad across a small table, brow furrowed in concentration. "Well, Monsieur Poirot, we've got ourselves quite the collection of suspects, each with motive, means, and opportunity." I settled into a leather chair, my mind reeling from the afternoon's revelations. Indeed, Inspector, Montgomery was juggling more than a few dangerous liaisons. Secretly engaged, involved in an affair, and under threat from a former protégé turned bitter rival. Poirot paced with characteristic precision, his grey eyes distant and thoughtful. "We, Hastings, but as always the challenge is to separate the wheat from the chaff. Let us review our suspects." Morrison nodded. "Victor Langley admits being here past midnight, had financial motives and was blackmailing Montgomery over the secret engagement." Poirot shook his head slightly. "Langley profits from secrets, not from silencing them. Dead men pay no debts, as he said." "What about Jenkins?" I asked. 15 years of loyal service but simmering bitterness, plus knowledge of the house and Montgomery's habits." Poirot nodded. "A classic suspect. Yet Jenkins had many chances, so why act now?" Morrison turned a page. "Then there's Julian Drake, jealous lover, aware of Montgomery's troubles, openly threatening exposure. He claimed ignorance of the engagement." "Ah, but no longer," Poirot said quietly. "He knew, learned it only days ago, and it broke his heart. His love for Mademoiselle St. Clair is as tangled as his hatred for Montgomery." I frowned. "That changes everything. He had motive, and he's emotionally volatile. Could he have acted out of desperation?" "Possibly," Poirot agreed. "Yet would he kill before confirming his suspicions? And would Evelyn risk losing him so violently?" Morrison looked up sharply. "Speaking of Evelyn St. Clair, she is calculating. She feared Montgomery was reconsidering their arrangement. Would she kill to keep him tethered? Or," Poirot said softly, "to prevent him from announcing a different engagement?" I shivered. "You mean Penelope?" "Surely not. She seemed the least likely. So young, so vulnerable." "Ah, but consider the timing," Poirot said, voice dropping. "Penelope spoke of Montgomery's distance yesterday, his talk of complications. What if he had fallen for her? What if the innocent young actress was about to change everything?" Morrison scribbled furiously. "That would give motive to both women, Evelyn to protect her position, Penelope to eliminate a rival. Or," Poirot said quietly, "Madame Fairmont, driven to protect her daughter from ruin." The room fell silent. Mrs. Fairmont's cold fury had been chilling, but it was the faint scent of exotic perfume still lingering in the air, and the dagger itself, ornate and theatrical, that caught Poirot's keen attention. "This murder was staged," he declared, "designed to mislead us, to suggest jealousy or desperation, when in truth it was a careful performance." Morrison frowned. "You think the killer wanted us looking at the obvious suspects?" "Precisely. The killer's cleverness lay in directing suspicion away from herself." I leaned forward, breath held. "Then you know who did it." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "I have my suspicions, mon ami. But suspicions alone are not proof. We must set a trap to watch how our murderer reacts." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "A trap?" "Oui, tonight after dinner in the drawing-room. I will announce my findings. The murderer will reveal themselves by their own hand." As we left the study, a cold weight settled over me. The tangled web of love, Betrayal and anger seemed almost too complex to untangle. "Poirot," I asked quietly as we walked toward the door, "are you certain who killed Montgomery?" He paused, his hand on the doorknob, turning with that familiar twinkle in his eyes. "Mais oui, Hastings. The killer has played their part with great skill. But tonight, the final act will expose the truth and reveal that sometimes the quietest heart harbors the darkest secret." The stage was set. As dusk fell over the Hollywood hills, the truth waited patiently, ready to shatter illusions and unveil the murderer lurking in plain sight. Chapter 6. The stage is set. The drawing-room was charged with a palpable tension as the suspects took their seats, eyes darting nervously, fingers twitching. The heavy curtains were drawn, plunging the room into soft twilight, while the flicker of the fireplace cast dancing shadows across tense faces. Poirot stood quietly for a moment, folding his hands with the grace of a conductor about to lead a final movement. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice calm but commanding, "we have come to the conclusion of this tragic tale. Each of you, in your own way, had reason to desire Monsieur Montgomery's silence. But as always, the truth is hidden beneath layers of deception." He looked first to Victor Langley, the blackmailer. "Monsieur Langley, you admit to being here well past midnight, and you sought to profit from secrets, financial ruin, perhaps even destruction. Yet your greed depends on Montgomery's continued existence. Dead men, as you said, pay no debts. Your threat was to expose, not to kill." Langley's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Poirot's gaze turned to Jenkins, the long-time servant. "You bore resentment for years, watching your former partner's success from the shadows. But you had countless opportunities. Why choose tonight? Why now?" Jenkins' eyes lowered, the weight of his bitterness evident. "Because you were not the killer," Poirot concluded firmly. All eyes shifted as Poirot addressed Julian Drake. "Monsieur Drake, you presented yourself as a man blinded by jealousy and suspicion, unaware of the true engagement. But during our interview, I observed your carefully concealed knowledge, your fury over the betrayal, and your devotion to Mademoiselle St. Clair. You threatened Montgomery openly. Passionate men can be dangerous." Julian's hands curled into fists, but he remained silent. "Yet, would you act before confronting the truth? Would you kill without certainty?" Poirot asked softly. Next, Evelyn St. Clair, the poised fiancée. "Mademoiselle St. Clair, you spoke coldly of love as a contract, a business arrangement. The threat of losing Montgomery's favor would jeopardize your ambitions, your position. Would you kill to protect your future?" Her eyes were steady, unflinching. Poirot's voice softened as he looked toward Mrs. Fairmont. "Madame Fairmont, your fury was fierce and raw when Penelope's secret came to light. You wished to protect your daughter, to shield her from ruin and heartbreak. But protection can become prison." Her face was unreadable, resolute. "And now," Poirot said, slowly turning to Penelope, "we come to you, Mademoiselle Fairmont." Penelope's breath caught. Her eyes were red-rimmed, vulnerable. "You have been portrayed as the innocent ingenue. Too young, too fragile to commit such a crime. But you lied about the timing of your last meeting with Monsieur Montgomery." "Why?" Tears began to form. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of what, mademoiselle?" "That if I lost him, I would lose everything. The hope, the dream he gave me. I loved him. I still do." Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but probing. "Love is a powerful thing, but it can blind us to reason. You told us of his distant words, the talk of endings and futures. You were desperate, abandoned, betrayed. Penelope's hands trembled. He was going to leave me. He told me he had to think about what was best for everyone. And did that thought not terrify you? Poirot asked. She nodded, choking back a sob. The dagger, Poirot said, lifting the ornate weapon carefully, was taken from the theatre props, the very place you spent hours rehearsing and dreaming. The perfume, exotic and unmistakable, lingered on your garments, found at the scene. He let the silence deepen. You staged the scene, Poirot said softly. An attempt to divert suspicion to others, the blackmailer, the jealous ex-partner, the protective mother, but none had access like you. The room was still as death. You, Penelope, were driven by a love so fierce and fragile it turned to rage. Penelope looked up, eyes wide, face pale. Yes, I did it. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to listen, to stay. But when he said he had to end things, I lost control. I didn't mean to kill him, but I couldn't let him go. Not after all he promised. Not after the way he made me feel. After Mother retired that evening, I slipped out with the dagger I'd taken from the studio props. I knew he'd be working late in his study. When he confirmed our affair was ending, that he intended to marry Evelyn, I struck him in desperation. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. The room was stunned into silence. Even Mrs. Fairmont seemed shaken, the confident mask shattered. Love, Poirot said softly, can inspire both the most beautiful and the darkest acts. Your performance was flawless, so much so that few suspected the tempest beneath the calm surface. The room remained silent as the weight of Penelope's confession settled over them. The fragile ingénue, long seen as victim, was the architect of this tragedy. The greatest performance, it seemed, had been her own. Chapter 7. Epilogue. As we escorted Penelope away, her sobs echoing softly through the grand hall, I found myself wrestling with a heavy sense of sorrow. The sweet girl I thought I knew, fragile, innocent, hopeful, had been but a carefully crafted illusion. Beneath that delicate veneer lay a storm of passion and despair fierce enough to destroy a man. I glanced at Mrs. Fairmont, whose pale face spoke of shattered trust and heartbreak. How well do we truly know those closest to us? How often do love and desperation twist the brightest souls into shadows? Poirot's words lingered in my mind, that love can inspire both beauty and darkness, and that sometimes the greatest performance is the one played out behind closed doors. In the end, justice would be done. But I couldn't help feeling that, in a place like Hollywood, where dreams and deception dance so closely together, the line between victim and villain is far thinner than it seems. And as the evening shadows deepened over Montgomery's mansion, I wondered, how many more tragedies lay hidden beneath the glimmering surface of the silver screen? As the lights dim over Montgomery's mansion, Hercule Poirot's relentless logic has stripped away the glamour to reveal a heart shattered by love's cruel illusion. Penelope Fairmont stands unmasked, her desperate act of passion unveiled by a trace of perfume and a stolen dagger. The Hollywood affair reminds us that beneath the silver screen's dazzle, the darkest secrets fester in the quietest souls. We hope this journey through betrayal and redemption has gripped you, dear listeners. Did you spot the killer before Poirot, or were you swayed by the ingénue's charm? Share your thoughts below. If the Hollywood affair has enthralled you, please like and subscribe to Nocturnal Tales for more tales of suspense. Support our craft with a tip via Super Thanks or by joining our membership, link in the description. Thank you for joining us, and until our next tale, may your nights be filled with intrigue and your days with clarity.